War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy was published in 1985 in her first collection of poetry, Standing Female Nude. Duffy was inspired to write this poem as a result of conversations with her friends, the war photographers Don McCullin, whose photography of the Vietnam War and the Northern Ireland conflict is particularly highly regarded, and Philip Jones Griffiths, who is known for his coverage of the suffering of the Vietnamese people during the Vietnam War. In the poem, the eponymous war photographer is in his darkroom, developing the photographs from his latest assignment. One of the images is of a man dying in a distant land, and this triggers a distressing memory as it slowly comes into focus. These photographs will be taken to a newspaper photo editor, who will pay the photographer for a mere handful of them for the Sunday supplement. The poem muses on the fact that they will cause momentary discomfort to the reader between his or her other Sunday morning activities. The photographer then flies off on another assignment. The poem invites us to ponder a number of issues. Firstly, the moral dilemma that presents itself to the war photographer. Is it ethical to intrude, often uninvited, into the suffering and torment of innocent people at the most vulnerable time of their lives, and to make a living from it? Don McCullin has said, "When a person is dying or he is injured badly, does he really need you looking over him with a camera? You're the last person he wants to see. He wants to see medical people rushing towards him, not me." Secondly, how does the war photographer reconcile him or herself to the way in which their job is purely to document what they see and not to intervene? Don McCullin has spoken of his sense of uselessness when faced with starving children in the war-torn African country of Biafra, who looked at him as though he was some kind of saviour, when, in reality, all he had on him was a couple of cameras slung around his neck. Thirdly, how do they feel about the fact that they are able to leave the war zone behind, while those living through it are effectively prisoners? And finally, the motivation of the war photographer is to document conflict and increase public awareness. But has this become tainted by the way in which these images are curated by editors back home for commercial purposes? Don McCullin has said that he believes the media isn't really interested in the real tragedy in our lives. The poem consists of 4 stanzas of 6 lines each. It has an A, B, B, C, D, D rhyme scheme, the regularity of which contrasts with the chaos of the subject matter. There is no fixed rhythmic structure, but there are places where Duffy uses an iambic rhythm, which serves to enhance the solemnity of the poem's tone. The poem is mainly written in the present tense, which gives it a sense of immediacy, and allows the reader to experience what the photographer is experiencing at the same time. There are also links to the past and the future. The development of the photograph of the dying man triggers the photographer's memory of the event. The final stanza focuses on the future, on the choices that the editor will make, on the reaction of the readers of the newspaper in which the photographs will appear, and on the photographer's inevitable journey to another war zone. Perhaps Duffy is trying to communicate her despair, and that of her war photographer friends, at the perpetual nature of war. The title is a simple one. There have been war photographers ever since technology has allowed, although very early war photography was restricted to portraits of soldiers and static staged battle scenes due to the long exposure times needed. A number of photographs of the Second Anglo-Sikh War were produced as far back as the 1840s. The nature of the photographs that can be taken has changed in line with advances in technology, and the First World War was the first war where a camera was small enough to be carried on the person. War photography is a dangerous occupation. Photographers often find themselves in harm's way and can get themselves killed. Their exposure to all kinds of atrocity can be highly traumatizing. The poem begins. In his dark room, he is finally alone. The poem is set in the days before digital photography, when physical film in a camera had to be processed using chemicals to create a negative, from which a positive print could then be reproduced on photographic paper. Because photographic paper is photosensitive, all of this has to take place in a room which is dark. The wavelength of red light means that this is the only kind which does not affect the paper, and the use of a safe light is how the photographer is able to see what he or she is doing before and after the negatives are exposed. The use of the adverb finally suggests that the darkroom is a calm haven, a respite from the chaos and brutality he has experienced. The use of enjambment, however, reveals a paradox, as we are forced to continue to the next line without a pause. He's alone, and yet he is not alone, as he is with spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. There's a sense that not only is this an opportunity for him to literally process his photographs, it is also an opportunity for him to mentally process them. The metaphor, spools of suffering, relates to the reels of film containing images of human torment caused by human brutality. The care and dedication with which he sets them out in ordered rows, as though these are the people themselves, evokes a sense of ritual and respect, and the image brings to mind the ordered rows one finds in military cemeteries, or formed by the pews in a church. This is enhanced by the sibilant alliteration, causing the reader to slow down. He clearly feels that he has a responsibility towards the people he is documenting. The juxtaposition of suffering with order suggests that, in his own limited way, the photographer is attempting to impose some kind of structure on the chaos he has observed and documented. Perhaps this is how he deals with what he has experienced, and is a way of keeping his emotions in check. The only light is red and softly glows, as though this were a church and he a priest preparing to intone a mass. Duffy links the safe light that you find in dark rooms with the light that burns in Catholic churches to symbolise the presence of Christ. This simile suggests that there is something holy or sacred about his task, and adds to the sense of ritual. In the Catholic Church, a requiem mass is offered for the repose of the souls of the dead. The stanza finishes with the line, Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, or flesh is grass. Belfast, Beirut and Phnom Penh are all locations of war zones which have seen significant numbers of casualties, and which, it is implied, this war photographer has covered. The listing of them suggests the ubiquity and never-ending nature of conflict. The phrase, all flesh is grass, originates in the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 40 verse 6, although there are numerous references to it scattered throughout the Bible. It is an image communicating the frailty and transience of human life, in that grass may grow and flourish, but it just as quickly withers and dies. The caesura caused by the separation of these single words and the iambic rhythm of the whole line makes the tone solemn, as though he is intoning the Latin words of a mass. Duffy continues the iambic rhythm into the first sentence of the second stanza. He has a job to do. The imposition of this regular rhythm on his preparation for the task suggests his own imposition of order on his emotions, and how he needs to distance himself and remain detached. Solutions slop in trays beneath his hands which did not tremble then, though seem to now. The solutions referred to are the liquid chemicals in which the treated film is placed, such as the developer, the stop bath and the fixer, in order to create the negative. The sibilants, the consonants of the l sounds and the onomatopoeia evoke the sound of the chemicals spilling from the trays beneath his hands, which did not tremble then. The fact that they did not tremble then says more about his professionalism than any lack of emotion. The ability to take an in-focus photograph depends upon a photographer holding the camera steady. The enjambment which effectively cuts this image in two by placing "those seem to now" on the next line emphasises the fact that, now in the quiet of his darkroom, the prospect of reliving his experiences as the photographs develop distresses him. Duffy firmly locates the photographer's body, if not his soul, home again, with the two-word minor sentence, rural England. This phrase has connotations of a green and pleasant land of peace and tranquillity. The phrase first world problem did not enter the Oxford English Dictionary until 2012, but it seems appropriate to apply it to the ordinary pain which afflicts England's inhabitants. The fact that simple weather can dispel it suggests that our problems are trivial by comparison with what he has seen. For example, he has returned to fields which don't explode beneath the feet of running children in a nightmare heat. By describing the qualities of the fields back here at home with qualities that they don't have, Duffy vividly evokes the horrors of war-torn countries, such as Vietnam, in which a mistake by the northern Vietnamese during the Vietnam War led to the bombing of a village, rather than a strategic military target with napalm. Napalm bombs are particularly nasty in that they contain a mixture of gasoline and a gelling agent, which can be projected in a solid stream over long distances, and which sticks tenaciously to its targets, burning at a nightmare heat of between 800 and 1200 degrees Celsius. The aftermath of this attack, in which civilian men, women and children were maimed and killed, was photographed by Nick Ut, a Vietnamese photographer, and Duffy's choice of words here vividly alludes to one of the most iconic war photographs of all time, where severely burned, running children are fleeing the explosion. The third stanza begins with the short sentence, "Something is happening." The pronoun something is vague and could apply not only to the as yet unrecognisable developing image, but also perhaps to the triggering of a nascent memory. A stranger's features faintly start to twist before his eyes, a half-formed ghost. The person in the picture is a stranger, a dying civilian whose name he probably never knew, and yet the irony is that he shared one of the most intimate moments a person has with him, his death. The man is obviously in pain as his features start to twist. The way in which he is a half-formed ghost communicates the spectral nature of the image as it slowly takes on form and substance. It could also be an allusion to the fact that the man is now dead. The image triggers his memory as he remembers the cries of this man's wife. The internal conflict that war photographers must suffer over this intrusion into someone's tragedy and grief, with their belief that it is nevertheless necessary, as communicated by his desire for tacit or unspoken permission, how he sought approval without words, to take the photograph, even though at the same time he believes that to take it is his duty, or to do what someone must, to document it so that the world is aware. Less is certainly more here, as Duffy manages to evoke a vivid image, even though she is quite sparing of her details. The injuries the man has sustained are alluded to by the image of the blood staining into the foreign dust. and reminds us of the sentence ending the first stanza, "All flesh is grass." The image of the man as he lies dying is just one of 100 agonies in black and white from which his editor will pick out 5 or 6 for Sunday's supplement. The disconnect between the photographer and his editor is evident here. For the photographer, each of these 100 photographs is a record of an agony, attached to which is a memory of an individual, just as vivid as the one described in the previous stanza. The term black and white not only refers to the monochrome medium in which the photographs have been taken, but also to the fact that the individual's suffering is not a grey area and cannot be denied. For the editor, however, these images must be considered within the constraints of the publication's layout and its readership. The mass media presents a curated view of the world. The subject matter, how graphic the images are, the number of photographs and how they are edited, e.g. cropped or airbrushed, all influence the way in which they are seen and responded to by the public, and, as a consequence, have an impact on sales. There's a sense that the photographer's duty to document the war has been diluted by the agendas of the publications to which they are sold. Of the 100 images, at least 94 of them will be rejected. Human life is cheap and has become a commodity to be discarded if not deemed profitable. The fact that the images will be appearing in Sunday's supplement, or in one of the many magazines that come along with the Sunday broadsheet newspapers, such as the Sunday Times or the Observer, has connotations of the middle classes, who, it is suggested, have become complacent and desensitised to conflicts which happen in distant lands. This is further communicated by the way in which the reader's eyeballs prick with tears between the bath and pre-lunch beers. This image is an example of intentional bathos, or anticlimax, where the tone abruptly transitions from one of loftiness to one of vulgarity, enhanced by the internal rhyme of tears with beers. For the reader, these images are only an interlude between the leisurely routine activities of a Sunday morning. Their eyeballs will merely prick with tears, but this is a purely superficial and short-lived response, as any sense of distress will quickly be dissipated by the pre-lunch beers. The plosive alliteration of the pr and b sounds perhaps suggests Duffy's contempt. Historically, these kinds of photographs have been very powerful in terms of changing public attitudes towards the rationale behind the conduct of the war. Nick Utz's famous 1972 photograph, The Terror of War, to which Duffy has already alluded in the poem, featuring a naked 9-year-old girl fleeing a napalm attack in Vietnam, highlighted the idea that the war was doing more harm than good. The conflict ended that same year. In the age of mass media, however, the greater the number of traumatising images we see, paradoxically, the more desensitised we become. So we are left with the question of whether they are still serving their true purpose. In the final 2 lines of the poem, the photographer is in an aeroplane, presumably off on assignment to another war zone, as there is always a conflict somewhere in the world. He stares impassively at where he earns his living, and they do not care. There is a suggestion that the photographer senses he does not really belong in either world. He doesn't belong in the foreign countries whose conflicts he observes, and yet the trauma he has experienced means that he also feels disconnected from his own country. He looks impassively down at where he earns his living, presumably a foreign war zone, from the air, seemingly neither showing nor allowing himself to feel emotion. He refers to his fellow Englanders as they, rather than we, indicating that he does not feel one of them either. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature text.